The Dark Knight is overrated. Way overrated. The film that the word overrated was invented for. Who paid the critics? I didn't like it. Oh, heaven forfend! Overrated is worst sucked movie in year. This is the bad movie. Wow, a lot of people really think The Dark Knight is overrated. Only one of those quotes was made up by me. Greetings, traveler. I'm Nyckelhypa, and I'm here to unveil an answer to the question in the title of this video. Let me start by detailing the perspective I bring to this topic and giving a brief overview of my methodology. I feel this is important, but feel free to skip ahead or skip around using the timestamps in the description below. I wouldn't consider myself a die-hard Christopher Nolan fan. Although I've liked almost all of his films, I typically appreciate rather than enjoy his work. Among all his films, The Prestige remains the only one that I adore and would consider as the perfect Christopher Nolan film to put on my all-time favorite list. The Dark Knight, I think, has some serious flaws, but I still enjoy it a lot overall. So my approach to this question is almost neutral. I disagree with both those who give it a perfect score and those who rate it a 1 out of 10 or even a 5 out of 10. My personal rating fluctuates between 7 and 8 depending on the day. Users on IMDb rate The Dark Knight with a 9 out of 10, and it holds a 94% approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes. I don't think those numbers show that it is an overrated film. This prompts the essential preliminary question: what does the word overrated even signify anymore? Making this video would be pointless if I used the word as it is commonly used in art conversations. Often it simply indicates that the claim's author is less emotionally connected to the work than others. Individuals who claim that something is overrated also tend to overstate the level of positive feedback it receives, and they may distort the nature of that positive feedback. I'm sure we've all read statements like, "I can't comprehend why everyone and their grandmother thinks that X is the best thing ever," or "If it wasn't for nostalgia, nobody would think that Y is good." The authors of such claims are grappling with cognitive dissonance, perhaps caused by their own insecurities. They're searching for validation, and they frequently don't conceal that when their claim opens with a rhetorical question, "Am I the only one who thinks," etc. It's evident that they're waiting for support, because they're aware that their contrarian viewpoint isn't actually unique and the support is coming. When like-minded individuals inevitably congregate around the claim that a work of art is overrated, something humorous unfolds. The claim becomes progressively weaker with each new supporter. After all, the greater the number of people that deem a work of art as unimpressive, the lower its perceived quality becomes. Which brings me to how I think the word overrated should be defined for it to remain a useful term and for my investigation of The Dark Knight's reputation to begin. For a work to be overrated, its perceived quality must surpass its actual quality. This encompasses receiving recognition for things it hasn't accomplished, being praised for positive traits it doesn't have, or having its negative traits downplayed or disregarded. That's the definition of the word overrated that I will go by when analyzing The Dark Knight and its reception by fans and critics. And here's the method I used for gathering relevant data. First, I compiled the primary criticisms from a range of mixed and negative reviews by top critics on Rotten Tomatoes. Then I compiled the most popular opinions by users on IMDb, selecting reviews with at least 100 upvotes. Next, I repeated the same process with highly positive reviews, specifically those that rated The Dark Knight more favorably than I would. The main idea is this: if negative reviews reveal unacknowledged flaws, or positive reviews contain undeserved praise, that lends credibility to the argument that The Dark Knight is overrated. However, if the positive reviews, regardless of their scores, acknowledge flaws, or at the very least don't deny them, and avoid unwarranted praise, that will help disprove the notion that the film is overrated. This method isn't perfect, but I feel it's as close to an empirical examination of perceived quality versus actual quality that I can get with a film. There are bound to be disagreements on what constitutes a flaw and what unwarranted praise means, but let's see how it goes. At the very least, this method sidesteps any subjective feelings, including my own, and the levels of emotional attachment that inspire the usual claims of a work of art being overrated or underrated. Let's look at critical reception first, and then examine reception by fans. The 4 most commonly named shortcomings of The Dark Knight by professional film critics like David Ansen of Newsweek, Stephen Hunter of Washington Post, Jonathan Romney of The Independent, and many others are: 1. Poorly edited, confusing action scenes. 2. Depressing and dark tone and a lack of fun. 3. Too much Joker and Harvey Dent, and not enough Batman or his friends and allies. 4. An anticlimactic finale. If we view these as mere descriptions, I think all 4 common criticisms are accurate. However, apart from the fight scenes being poorly edited to the point of being almost incoherent, I don't consider the other three criticisms to be objective flaws. Viewers who find villains more interesting than heroes may consider too much Joker, not enough Batman to be a positive. A lighthearted or fun tone is not inherently superior to a dark or nihilistic tone even in a superhero movie. The impact of an anticlimactic ending can be equally or more powerful than a grandiose conclusion, regardless of genre. Monty Python and the Holy Grail has one of the most anticlimactic endings ever, and I found it brilliant. That example is a bit of a stretch, isn't it? Nevertheless, let's agree, for argument's sake, that all four flaws are objective. And let's examine positive reviews by Richard Corliss, Michael Phillips, Andrew Saris, and other professional critics. Remember, the flaws in The Dark Knight don't make it overrated, unless critics ignore those flaws or claim it is a flawless masterpiece. Regarding the first flaw, poorly edited and confusing action scenes. According to Michael Phillips from the Chicago Tribune, the film featured impressive action scenes, particularly the truck flipping scene. He lauded Wally Feister, the cinematographer, for achieving a haunting look in the scene, and commended Christopher Nolan for his emphasis on practical effects and stunts rather than digital effects. Bob Mondello of NPR.org called the action scenes exhilarating and straightforward. James Berardinelli of Real Views said that Nolan avoids flash editing and allows the action to evolve in a coherent manner, drawing the viewer in rather than keeping him guessing what's going on. Peter Travers of Rolling Stone called the action in The Dark Knight feverish, and added that Christopher Nolan has a finesse for choreographing action that rivals Michael Mann's Heat. And Richard Corliss of Time wrote that the chase scenes are spectacular. The people who believe The Dark Knight is overrated are winning this first round, in my opinion. I don't mind positive reviews that applaud the cinematography and lighting in the chase scenes. And Christopher Nolan's preference for stunt work and practical effects over CGI is undeniable and, in my opinion, highly commendable. It did surprise me to see professional critics specifically praising the choreography though. There are videos by people that are well versed in editing that meticulously delve into the inconsistent and confusing nature of the action scenes, and while we shouldn't view the analysis in these videos as infallible, I think their criticisms are legitimate. But even if they weren't, it's baffling to me that James Berardinelli, a critic I've admired for over a decade, can claim that the editing is not flashy. The presence of flashy editing in The Dark Knight's action scenes cannot be denied even if you don't mind it. I mean, you can deny it, but when you do so to praise the film, you're demonstrably exaggerating the film's quality. Regarding the second flaw, the movie's dark tone and a lack of fun. Heath Ledger's performance as the Joker is brilliant, precise, and yes, playful. Glenn Kenny of Mubi. The Dark Knight is insurmountable fun. Rex Reed of The Observer. Reed also wrote that the film is a Coney Island roller coaster ride with some of the rails missing. Devilish fun? Check. Ledger takes the role to the shadows, where even what's comic is hardly a relief. Peter Travers of Rolling Stone. With little humor to break the tension, The Dark Knight is beyond dark. It's as black and teeming and toxic as the mind of the Joker. Richard Corliss of Time. If we were to pretend that lacking fun or having a dark tone is an objective flaw, which I don't actually think it is, would detractors again emerge victorious? Not at all. The critics who praised The Dark Knight pointed out its dark tone, as exemplified by quotes from Richard Corliss and Peter Travers. Glenn Kenny and Peter Travers spoke of playfulness or fun, specifically devilish fun, only in the context of Heath Ledger's Joker performance. It's futile to deny that the Joker has at least a few playful or fun moments. Take, for instance, his hilarious and perfect mockery of the guy attempting to remove Batman's mask only to get electrocuted. As for Rex Reed, claiming that the film is insurmountable fun, he's being facetious. As with all the other reviews, I read his from beginning to end, and his use of irony is evident. One of the first sentences in his review reads, "If logic is a word you cannot apply to this movie, neither is boring." So the one critic who claimed the movie as a whole was fun meant it in a "it's so bad it's good" kind of way. Compliments based on that don't seem like an exaggeration of quality to me. The third flaw. Too much Joker and Harvey Dent, and not enough Batman and his friends and allies. I'll make this part of the review as quick and concise as I can. It's the Joker's movie all the way, wrote Rex Reed, and no one on planet Earth has ever written or will ever write anything to the contrary. If too much Joker is a flaw, it is a flaw that nobody denies. And if it is a strength, as Michael Phillips suggests, then it is a strength that nobody denies. Michael Phillips also wrote, "The transformation of Harvey Dent into Two-Face comes at a narrative cost. The film's focus is thrown slightly out of whack. Thus, even the far less common criticism that too much of the narrative focuses on Harvey Dent is acknowledged in an otherwise positive review. Regarding Lucius and Alfred, I didn't find any positive reviews that denied their roles were diminished compared to Batman Begins or criticized that fact. We may accept this as a reason to think that a flaw has been unfairly disregarded, but we shouldn't ignore the fact that those critical reviews pointing it out neglected to mention Gordon's significantly increased role. I can understand the feelings behind this third major complaint, but I cannot give a point to the detractors because I don't see any demonstrable overrating happening here. This just leaves the fourth claimed flaw, an anticlimactic ending. As with the previous claim, I didn't find many mentions of the ending or the final quarter of the film in positive reviews. There was no praise, but not much condemnation either. I could put Michael Phillips' previous quote about Harvey Dent's transformation making the film lose focus here as an example of a positive review criticizing the ending, but it's not an exact fit. Richard Corliss of Time, however, not only acknowledged the idea of a weak finale, but also said that the ending scenes ruin the perception of The Dark Knight as a masterpiece. Corliss praises the movie extensively, making his expression of disappointment regarding the ending quite severe. If I imagine myself as a filmmaker, I think an outright bashful review would probably hurt less than reading something like, "You may think this film is a masterpiece, but that feeling will pass." Ouch. So, let's wrap up this section. The reviews I saw indicate that The Dark Knight was not excessively praised or hyped for the most part. Despite receiving top ratings, critics didn't describe it as flawless. At least 2, and often more, positive reviews acknowledged every major problem mentioned in negative and mixed reviews. Among those major flaws, only one, action choreography and editing, was falsely praised. And not even by all reviewers. James Berardinelli was the only one who crossed into undeniable overrating territory by stating that the editing is not flashy and the action is easy to follow. I believe that the other reasons, given by Berardinelli and other positive critics, to consider The Dark Knight a great film are valid. I don't think I could make a convincing argument against them even if I hated the movie. The characters in the film are the subject of thought-provoking questions. Action scenes absolutely rely more on practical effects and stunts than CGI. The story noticeably lacks the usual everything will be okay sentiment. The Joker is unique because he lacks the internal conflicts and complexities of the other characters. One doesn't have to be a fan of Heath Ledger's performance to recognize that characterization. And now for something completely different, the fan response. This part will not be quite so serious. In fact, it's tonight's entertainment. I'm a man of my word. The fans who voted The Dark Knight into the top 5 on IMDb have surely given it excessive praise, even if the critics didn't. This one reviewer writes, "Perfect directing, perfect story, perfect balance between action and drama, everything is perfect. Even if you hate Batman, you will love this film. If you don't, then something bees wrongs with yous." 2,000 upvotes from other IMDb users. Another review claims, "The Dark Knight is as good as everyone says and easily the best superhero film ever made." 700 people concur. Nearly 4,000 upvotes have been given to a user review that claims the film surpasses the hype. And plenty of fans also agree that The Dark Knight is the best film of 2008 and the best film ever. Well, looks like there's no ambiguity here. Perfect, 10 out of 10, the best movie ever made. There's no way that those on the opposite side would make such exaggerated and irrational claims. The ugliest, stupidest movie I've ever seen. I would have walked out if I weren't trapped at the end of the aisle. I feel like the little child in the Emperor's new clothes. What's going on here? Has everyone turned blind? Number 4 currently on the IMDb top 100? Someone's getting paid. Well, I'll be damned. Here's a really fun one. The fact that this is the number 1 movie is embarrassing. IMDb should take it off out of principle. If this wins an Oscar, I will never watch a Hollywood movie again. I hope this person likes foreign language films. There have been plenty of great ones made in the last 15 years, so at least they're better off than this person. I cannot live with the super high praising comments of professional critics. A moment of silence for this principled individual. May they rest in peace. The movie itself isn't a 1 out of 10, but I am so disappointed by it that it deserves its 1. I gave it a 1 out of 10, which is too harsh, but I felt obligated to bring down the overall rating. Most of these reviews have several hundred upvotes, with a minimum of 100. Even the person who confessed to rating manipulation has 173 other IMDb users supporting them. Yes, the 3 highest rated positive reviews on IMDb have thousands of upvotes, but I also didn't find anything in those that would compare to confessing to rating abuse. That doesn't mean fans of The Dark Knight haven't also manipulated ratings by bombing other beloved films with 1-star ratings. In fact, there was apparently a campaign of vote abuse happening back in 2008. A war, you might say, between fans of The Dark Knight and fans of the Godfather films. This incredibly silly incident points to a deeper issue, as do all cases of manipulation of ratings on forums and databases. Some art consumers have an inflated sense of self-importance, viewing their opinion as the objective yardstick for quality. The casual use of the word overrated and fans' vote abuse campaigns both arise from a narcissistic impulse to restore things to their perceived rightful state. Regrettably, we can't avoid all manifestations of this impulse just by disregarding exaggerated reviews and fanbase conflicts. Maybe you're wondering why I have not covered IMDb reviews with ratings of 4, 5 or 6 out of 10. Users that argue The Dark Knight is overrated, but don't resort to eccentric criticisms or trying to manipulate the average rating must exist. Well, they do. Let's look at some of those reviews. This review rates The Dark Knight with a 7 and has 113 upvotes. The author writes that while they can't understand the film's high placement in the top 250, they can at least respect it. But the review also includes the proclamation, all in all, an okay superhero movie. 7 stars. But 9? Come on people, that's crazy. A popular user review that congratulates Christopher Nolan for making a good movie still says that comparing The Dark Knight to old masterpieces or saying it is the best film ever is completely unacceptable. This review, with 287 upvotes, opens with the film that seems to have fooled everyone. Another 6 out of 10 rating review includes criticism that flat out insults the film's perceived target audience. A review from a grandparent with over 400 upvotes tries to downplay The Dark Knight's positive reception by implying that its fans lack an understanding of cinema. The classic "you just don't know any better" argument. And then there are those reviews that imply fans who rate the film very highly are just victims of hype. Nearly all of these reviews also contain valid critiques about the film. The opinions expressed here, as opposed to the ones found in 1-star reviews, are nuanced and well articulated. It's likely that the grandparent genuinely wants to help young moviegoers by recommending movies from bygone eras. And yet, with 2 exceptions, the most popular mixed reviews couldn't simply criticize the movie. They all felt the urge to insinuate or openly declare that fans who rate The Dark Knight very highly are more than wrong. They're not individuals who have their own preferences in movies, no. They are the great unwashed, who have been fooled into expressing crazy and unacceptable views. This is the embodiment of elitism, a group of art consumers who assert that anyone who enjoys something more than they do is inherently mistaken. And that's why I have a strong dislike for claims of things being overrated. Instead of sparking conversations about artworks, it usually derails them or halts them. One can challenge the claim to initiate a discussion or debate, of course, but if the author proceeds from the assumption that anyone who likes a work more than they do is fundamentally mistaken, they're more likely to explain away positive opinions than to genuinely examine the art. At least that's what I've personally observed. Or maybe it's all because I'm actually a Christopher Nolan fanboy in disguise. Maybe I was lying when I said I think The Dark Knight is a flawed film. Perhaps I have a shrine to Mr. Nolan in my attic, where I burn crayon drawings and cabbage to fuel his success. Well, no. And to prove it, I will now spend several minutes complaining about all the things that sucked about The Dark Knight, including some flaws that have been rarely mentioned even in the harshest of critiques. Like my grandfather once yelled at his church organ when it refused to stay in tune, "Stay tuned." The Dark Knight prioritizes its dramatic goals over logical coherence. It's so bad that at times it's more comical than dramatic. I'm not even referring to instances such as Harvey/Two-Face speaking normally despite his injuries, or how he miraculously recovered his half-burned suit. I'm referring to matters where the justification, "it's just a comic book movie," doesn't hold up. This film aimed for a serious and profound narrative, which makes that excuse mostly irrelevant anyway, but there are plenty of moments in The Dark Knight that don't make sense even when considering that potential excuse. Let's look at just some of them. The angle at which the bus crashes through the bank wall means the traffic should have already been disrupted before Joker's escape. Chaos and panic should have already erupted in the streets. Although the concept of aspiring Batman is intriguing, I'm skeptical that numerous hockey pad-clad imitators appeared prior to Batman's arrival. Without Bruce Wayne's wealth, resources, or connections in Gotham PD, How could they possibly be aware of a meeting between top-level criminals and even arrive before Batman? Rachel and Bruce's fall from a skyscraper onto a car roof causes the windows to shatter, but they miraculously suffer no harm. It's stupid, but I'll let it slide because it's what Bruce says next that truly bothers me. Bruce assures Rachel that Harvey is out of harm's way. By what means does Bruce possess that knowledge? Why did he believe the Joker wouldn't make an effort to find Harvey? The Joker remained inside the building. Unless he decided to give up and run away during the 3 seconds it took Bruce and Rachel to fall onto the taxi with a feather bed for a roof. Bruce enters the apartment building where the cops are bound and blindfolded without disguising himself. Without any explanation, he even removes his helmet. If the cops were not blindfolded and recognized him, what was he going to say? Did he intend to say, "I'm just here returning some videotapes"? The Joker could also have killed the cops he and his henchmen stole uniforms from, so why didn't he? I can see why one would want to avoid ruining the uniforms in a shootout, but what was the reason for sparing the cops once he had subdued them? Was it just a one-time act of mercy? Detective Stevens is heartbroken by Gordon's feigned death. Did he truly think that Gordon was no longer alive? Why would Stevens not check Gordon's pulse or breathing? Instead of calling for a medic, why did he opt for making a sad face? Either Gordon managed to temporarily stop his heart to deceive Stevens, or Stevens was aware of Gordon's pretense and went along with it. Unless Gordon informed Stevens in advance about his plan to take a bullet for the mayor, how would Stevens know to act accordingly? How did Gordon anticipate that he would have to be the one to take a bullet for the mayor? Did Gordon and Stevens agree in advance that if Gordon got shot, Stevens would pretend that Gordon was dead? How could Stevens be sure that Gordon was uninjured and didn't need urgent medical help? What about the rest of the police officers who were present? Did they witness Stevens appearing sad and immediately conclude that Gordon was deceased without checking his vital signs, attempting resuscitation, or calling for medical help? Believe it or not, but a pink donkey flew over my house 2 weeks ago and called me a sweaty calendar.
You are a sweaty calendar.
And that made a lot more sense than Gordon's act of pretending to be dead. What caused Batman to crash into the truck? Couldn't he have leapt off his Batpod and tackled the Joker, or safely passed by without colliding with the truck? It seemed intentional, as if he was deliberately aiming for it. So in a crucial moment, Batman collided with the truck and was rendered unconscious. Although it wasn't the ultimate showdown, it was still underwhelming and absurd. It's illogical for Stevens to be guarding the Joker inside the interrogation room. The door can be locked to prevent the Joker from escaping. It's obvious to everyone why Stevens is in there. The reason is to enable the Joker to hold him hostage and then get away. The writing here is so contrived that it can be considered objectively bad. Even if I wanted to, I wouldn't be able to defend this. The explosive device Joker planted in one of his henchmen seemingly incapacitates everyone at the Major Crimes Unit except Joker. A recurring criticism of The Dark Knight is that the Joker's plans consistently succeed flawlessly, despite their complexity and the apparent incompetence and expendable nature of his henchmen. I'm not too concerned about that specific issue, and I think that if Nolan had included a detailed explanation of how Joker's henchmen complete their tasks, it would have only made the film unnecessarily complicated. Nevertheless, I find it hard to believe that everyone else was taken out by the bomb while the Joker remained unharmed due to sheer luck. The bomb wasn't a henchman. Why did it also work exactly how Joker needed it to? Then Joker calls the TV station and gets connected instantly. There might be a reason behind this, but it feels like another stroke of luck. With Batman's secret identity on the brink of being exposed on live television, there must have been a flood of calls coming in every second. But Joker miraculously got through precisely when he intended to. Those were just a few of the instances where the story lacked coherence or had to rely on convenience in order to progress. More observant viewers can likely find double the amount of holes and inconsistencies in just the first hour. The prevalence of this particular problem makes it a valid reason for complaint, yet it continues to be the second least important problem on my list, trumping only the poor acting from the extras. What bothered me most about the film were two interconnected issues: weak dialogue and an inconsistent tone. Yes, I have a light behind me now. My gaffer forgot to turn it on for the rest of the video, so obviously they've been fired. When an actor of Michael Caine's caliber struggles to make what he's saying sound natural, it's evident that the dialogue is lacking. The Dark Knight includes lines that give the impression the writers were aiming to establish new cliches, and lines that assume the audience is painfully unintelligent. Alfred's story about the Burma Bandit and the stolen gemstones should have been enough. He didn't have to spell out the point of that story or its correlation to the Joker in dialogue. The Dark Knight is filled with numerous instances where the dialogue lacks subtlety and feels incredibly unnatural. The back and forth with Bruce and Alfred in the beginning, for example, is clunkily written to set up callbacks in future scenes. These comic booky lines of dialogue do not align with the film's pursuit of realism. What adds to my frustration is that Christopher Nolan is not unfamiliar with subtlety. For example, in the interrogation scene, there is a blink and you'll miss it moment where the Joker looks at Gordon's wristwatch and figures out the countdown until the buildings with Harvey and Rachel inside detonate. During their first encounter, Harvey Dent neglects to prepare a chair for Gordon in his office, subtly suggesting his lack of trust and respect for Gordon at that particular moment in the narrative. Some of the conversations in the film are also written with this level of skill and subtlety. It's hard to comprehend why Nolan and his co-writers, who are capable of crafting good dialogue, often choose not to. When things take a turn for the worse, the dialogue not only conflicts with realism, but transforms the scene's tone from thrilling to farcical. And to me, that flaw is the film's biggest downfall. Mere seconds after escaping what should have been certain death, Rachel casually suggests, "Let's not do that again." While this line would be suitable for an action comedy, it is completely inappropriate in a film aiming for a dark and profound narrative. The prime example of a clash of tones is the famous chase sequence. This action spectacle is massively diminished by the never-ending silly remarks made by this individual. Each line this character utters is irritating, but the worst is when he witnesses a helicopter crash and exclaims, "Okay, that's not good." It's difficult for me to feel a sense of danger and take the scene seriously when the character nonchalantly responds with, "That's not good," as people are burning and dying before his eyes. Also, what was the purpose of these peculiar reactions from this character? To add humor? The chase scene and the movie already featured a character who added great comedic moments while maintaining the film's dark tone. Imagine having the Joker in your movie, but thinking the comedic dialogue in a scene needs to come from some other character that we've never seen before and will never see again. This character and his cheesy one-liners make the chase sequence my least favorite part of the movie. It's that awful. Have I sufficiently demonstrated that I'm not a Christopher Nolan fanboy by now? I have? Okay, good. This is where I will probably disappoint some of the harsher critics of The Dark Knight because I don't think the flaws I pointed out make it an overrated film either. I may be cynical and pretentious, but I don't contradict myself. Even if my observations are completely accurate and the flaws are objectively there, and even if I think the film is a 7 out of 10, not a 9 out of 10, I'm just one person on YouTube. It would take just one critic unfairly dismissing a few good aspects of the movie in their review to counterbalance my review and prevent The Dark Knight from becoming overrated. It just goes to show, once again, how baseless most declarations of a work being overrated truly are. Let's summarize this analysis. There's very little evidence to suggest that The Dark Knight is overrated, except for the fight scene editing problem. Having watched the film countless times, pondered over it for 15 years, read countless reviews, and spent 2 weeks making this video, that's the conclusion that I have come to. Most professional critics were fair in their assessment of the film, with only a few of them going overboard with their praise of one aspect. Fans and IMDb users went deep into Sillyland with both praise and criticism, and the detractors demonstrated significantly more arrogance than the people who voted The Dark Knight into the top 3. And while I think The Dark Knight has some serious flaws regarding tone, dialogue, and internal consistency, I don't think I'm more objective than anyone else. And I don't think the people who rate it with a maximum score are automatically wrong. You may now be thinking that I made this video to discourage people from using the word overrated, or to prevent them from exaggerating the praise for popular artworks in online debates. And to that I say, I don't want you to stop. What would I do without you? Go back to whining about Final Fantasy and Twilight movies? No, you complete me. And given the frequency of artworks being labeled as overrated online, I think I'm destined to do this forever. Thank you for watching. May you always find great art to enjoy, and may you never run out of coffee and cookies. So, that's that video done. And it's good to be outside in the fresh air for a change. The sky is blue, the clouds are nice and white and fluffy, and the... Oh no, the donkey's back. It's not alone. They've come for my Nolan cabbage.
You are a sweaty calendar.